Hello, my name is Harlan. 3 nights ago, my parents looked me in the eyes, then chose to believe my brother's lies. So they kicked me out of the house I helped pay for. They kicked out my pregnant wife, 6 months along, and our 7-year-old son. In the middle of a snowstorm, no warning, no explanation, just a locked door and silence. They thought they'd broken me. What they didn't know was that I just inherited $9.5 billion from the man they all forgot existed. 3 hours later, I stopped begging to be part of their family and started making every one of them answer for what they did. But the part that still haunts me, they didn't even ask why. The cold always used to feel comforting to me. Growing up in Minneapolis, winter meant slow evenings, the smell of my mom's chili simmering on the stove, and the steady hum of my dad's old furnace. But that night, as we pulled into my parents' driveway with the wind clawing across the windshield, the cold felt different, sharper, too quiet. Callista shifted beside me, one hand resting on her belly. She'd had a long day at work and only agreed to come because my mom insisted it would be good family time. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Cassian was kicking his feet in the back seat, humming something off-key. I wrapped the green knit scarf around his neck, the one I made last winter when he kept losing every store-bought scarf we gave him. He grinned at me, teeth crooked and perfect. The porch light was on, but the house looked still, and Merrick's SUV sat crooked in the driveway. Engine already cold, headlights off, but cabin light glowing faintly through the tinted glass. He was early. He was never early. Callista tugged my sleeve lightly. She always knew when something tightened in me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just tired. Let's get inside before the wind gets worse." We stepped onto the porch, and even the wood felt tense under my boots. Inside, the house was warm, but not welcoming. My mom didn't come over to hug us. My dad didn't crack a joke. They stood in the living room like people bracing for a storm that wasn't the one outside. Merrick sat at the dining table with a neat stack of papers, his phone placed face down beside them. He didn't smile. He didn't stand up. He just watched me with a look I hadn't seen since we were kids, when he knew he could say something that would get me blamed. I felt Callista's fingers tighten around my arm. Even Cajun stopped humming. "Sit down, Harlan," my dad said. No warmth, not even pretend warmth. I didn't sit. Something inside me wouldn't let me. "What's going on?" Merrick exhaled like he'd been waiting for a cue. He slid the stack of papers toward me. "You want to explain why you've been siphoning money from the family fund?" The words didn't make sense at first. "What?" "It's all there." He continued tapping the documents with that signature calm he used when he wanted to look reasonable. "Transfers, dates, amounts missing. Mom and Dad needed that for their medical expenses." The papers looked real. The numbers were placed exactly where they needed to be to hurt me the most. Someone had put work into this, careful, methodical work. My mom's voice broke the silence. "Harlan, how could you?" I lifted my head fast. "Mom, no. I didn't touch that account. I've never—" She shook her head like she had already rehearsed not believing me. "We were warned you'd deny everything," my father added. "At least be honest with us." Warned. Warned by Merrick. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from something deeper, something old. I'd lived my whole life trying to be the steady son, the polite one, the one who worked quietly and didn't cause waves. And this was all it took for them to believe the worst of me? Callista stepped forward. There has to be some misunderstanding. Harlan would never. Merrick cut her off with a smooth, poisonous tone. You're pregnant, Callista. Maybe you didn't realize what he was doing. Stress can cloud things. That did it. Heat shot up my neck. I moved toward him, but Callista grabbed my sleeve. Harlan, no, not here. The windows rattled as the storm outside thickened, wind scraping across the siding. My parents turned their backs to me, holding on to Merrick's lie as if it were safer than hearing me out. I tried one more time, my voice steady even though everything inside me was shaking. Dad, Mom, please, look at me. Just look at me. Does this really sound like something I would do? Neither of them turned. Merrick leaned back in his chair with the faintest smirk. A quiet victory. And something in me cracked, not loudly, not visibly. Just a clean break inside the part of me that still believed I held a place in this family. My mother's voice came out cold. If you cannot take responsibility for what you've done, maybe you shouldn't be here tonight. Callista's breath caught. Cassian hid behind his coat. The room narrowed around me, everything closing in until all I could hear was the wind outside and my own heartbeat pounding behind my ribs. They hadn't even considered the possibility I was innocent. They chose who I was before I even walked through the door. You need to leave, all of you. The words landed with the weight of a gavel. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at me when he said it. He just gestured toward the front door, like a manager telling a late customer their table was no longer available. Callista's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Cassian's small fingers gripped tighter around the scarf I'd wrapped around his neck. For a second, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant groan of the blizzard pressing against the house. I stood there, trying to process that my father, who once carried me on his shoulders through snow this deep, was now throwing me, my pregnant wife, and our child out into it. Over a lie. I looked at my mother, hoping for even a flicker of hesitation. Nothing. Her face was stiff, like a curtain pulled shut. Merrick was already on his feet. I'll help them pack, he said, as if we were hotel guests overstaying our welcome. His tone had that rehearsed concern, the kind that made him sound reasonable while twisting the knife. You should get moving before the storm traps you here. We don't need more drama tonight. Drama? That was rich, coming from the man who just turned our family upside down. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. You all really believe this? After everything? I looked directly at my mother. You raised me. You know who I am. She flinched, barely. Then she folded her arms and said softly, Please, Harlan, don't make a scene. That flipped something inside me. She wasn't asking me to calm down. She was asking me to stay quiet. Again. Like always. I'd been silenced my entire life in this house, always told to let it go, to keep the peace, to be the understanding son when Merrick took more than his share of attention, of grace, of trust. And here we were again, except this time, it wasn't just my pride at stake, it was my family. My real family. I turned to Callista. We're going. Cassian was still clutching my leg. I picked him up. Callista nodded once and wrapped her coat tighter around herself, eyes glinting with anger, and something more. Fear. The second I opened the door, the storm punched into us. Snow whipped inside instantly, coating the hardwood floor, stinging our faces. I guided Callista and Cassian out, one step at a time. The porch stairs were already slick. I stepped down first, turned to help her. Her boot slipped. She pitched forward. I dropped Cassian into a sitting crouch on the porch, grabbed her arm just in time to stop her from falling outright. Got you, I breathed. Her face was pale. She clutched her belly protectively, breathing hard. She wasn't hurt, but the terror was real. We shouldn't have been outside. Not in this. I looked back toward the house, hoping someone, anyone, would come to their senses. Say something. Do something. Merrick stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching like he was monitoring a situation he believed he'd handled cleanly. Behind him, my parents were still motionless. My mother held one hand over her mouth. My father kept his arms stiff at his sides. Nobody moved. The door began to close, not slammed, no shouting, just a quiet, deliberate swing inward, slow, steady. It clicked shut like someone sealing a vault. That sound. I never imagined a door closing softly could hurt more than screaming. I lifted Kashin again. He didn't say a word, just pressed his face into my shoulder. I could feel him trembling through our coats. We trudged to the car. The wind was slicing now, blowing snow so hard it felt like shards. I tried the handle. Frozen solid. I yanked again. Nothing. I used my elbow to brush the snow off the driver's side window and kicked the bottom of the door, once, twice, until it creaked and cracked open. Callista was breathing in short, visible gasps. I wrapped my scarf tighter around Kazian, holding him close. My fingers were raw. I hadn't even grabbed gloves. Inside the car, the cold was deeper. The kind that crept into your bones and sat there. I got the engine running, barely. The heater sputtered. It would be at least 10 minutes before it started pushing out anything close to warmth. Then I heard Kajian's voice. Dad, why does Grandpa hate us? I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. Something inside me split. All the years I'd made excuses for my family, explained away the favoritism, the casual dismissals, the blind spots they refused to acknowledge, came crashing down in that moment. He had asked out of pure confusion, not anger, not bitterness, just the honest question of a child trying to make sense of something that shouldn't have happened. And I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was abandonment. I looked over at Callista. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes met mine, and she didn't have to say anything. We both knew this was a turning point, not just for tonight, for everything. As I shifted the car into gear, my jaw clenched. I wasn't going to let this define us. Not their lies, not their cowardice. I would protect my family, even if it meant burning down the idea of the one I came from. Harlan, we need help. Callista's voice was barely a whisper, but those 4 words hit harder than anything my father had said. I looked over and saw the way her hand hovered over her stomach, like instinct was stronger than thought. Her face was pale. Her lips had gone from pink to almost blue. Snow was caked into her eyelashes. Her breathing had become uneven, short, shallow. Her entire body had started to tremble, and not just from the cold. I didn't hesitate. I reached for my phone, fumbling with stiff fingers. No signal. I tried again. The screen stuttered between 1 bar and none. I opened the door wider to see if I could pick up reception, but the wind screamed back at me like it was warning me not to try. No bars, no Wi-Fi, no help. I got out of the car, braced my body against the wind, and raised my phone higher, walking a few feet away. Still nothing. Back in the car, Callista was leaning her head against the glass, eyes closed. Kashian had crawled into the back seat and was curled up, hugging his scarf like it was a shield. I hated that he had to see this. I hated that I couldn't stop it. Stay with me, I said, placing a hand gently on Callista's shoulder. You're okay. I've got you. Her eyes opened slowly. It's just tight. My back, my chest too. Her voice was thin, but calm in the way only a mother trying not to scare her child can be. I tried 911. The wind was so loud I could barely hear myself talk. The call connected, but the operator's voice was broken and full of static. Minneapolis emergency. Hello? Can't hear. Hello? My wife is pregnant. We've been thrown out. We're stuck in our car, and she's... Response time. Delays. Storm priority. Then silence. The line dropped. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the blank screen, and for the first time since the door closed behind us, I felt something different creep into me. This wasn't just cold. This was real danger. We weren't just hurt. We were stranded. I got out again, rushed to Callista's side of the car. As I opened the door, she tried to shift but nearly slipped onto the snowy pavement. I caught her under the arms, bracing her weight. Her legs were shaking, her balance unsteady. Hey, hey, I said, steadying her. I've got you. Don't try to move. She nodded, but her eyes were scared now. This driveway, this storm, this night, it wasn't survivable. Not for her, not for Cajun, not like this. I wrapped the scarf tighter around my son's neck, kissed the top of his head and said, "We're gonna be okay, buddy. I promise you." But my voice cracked at the end. I could hear it. I got Callista back into the car and closed the door. I dropped into the driver's seat and slammed both fists against the steering wheel. Then I pulled the key from my pocket, jammed it into the ignition, and turned it. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The third time, the engine coughed, whined, then started. The dashboard lights blinked to life like they were as surprised as I was. The heater clicked. Weak at first, but there. Relief flooded me, followed too quickly by something harder, sharper, rage. Not the kind that makes you yell, the kind that sits in your gut and builds like pressure behind a dam. I turned on the wipers. They dragged snow and ice across the windshield in stuttering arcs. I tapped the gas slowly. The tires spun once before catching. We started moving. Visibility was awful, maybe 10 feet ahead. Every street lamp glowed like a ghost behind the curtain of white. We didn't speak. Callista leaned her head back, eyes closed, still breathing shallow but steady now. Cassian had fallen asleep or maybe just shut down. He didn't move. It gave me too much time to think. And thinking meant remembering. It wasn't the first time Merrick had made me feel like this. I was 12. I just won the middle school award for academic excellence. It was a big deal back then, at least to me. I brought the certificate home, smiling, proud. My dad barely looked up from the TV. Mom said, "That's nice, sweetheart," and went back to folding laundry. Merrick glanced at the certificate and laughed. "You were never meant to lead this family." Dad didn't say a word. Mom changed the subject. That night stuck with me. Still does. Because it wasn't just what Merrick said. It was that no one thought it was worth correcting. And now, decades later, here we were. He hadn't changed, and neither had they. I kept hoping they'd see me one day. See who I was, what I built, what I carried. Tonight, I finally understood. They never intended to. My jaw clenched as I slowed the car at an intersection, more out of habit than necessity. No other cars were on the road. Just the storm, swallowing the city whole. I glanced at Callista. She opened her eyes, just for a second, and gave me a tired smile. I didn't deserve it. Not right then. She should have been cursing the night. Cursing me. Asking how I let it come to this. Instead, she was still trying to hold everything together. For me. Circassian. I wanted to reach for her hand, but both of mine were gripping the wheel, white-knuckled. That moment, her smile, her quiet strength, flipped something inside me. I didn't care about proving anything to my parents anymore. I didn't need their approval, their forgiveness, or their damn explanation. What I needed, what I had, was right here in this car. My family. I turned onto the main road. The tires skidded, then found traction. We kept going. I didn't know where we were headed yet, but I knew this much. They might have thrown us out, but I wasn't broken. I was done waiting to be seen. Now I'd start building something of my own, something real, something stronger. I wouldn't let this night define us. But the storm wasn't the only danger waiting for us that night. The next person who called my phone changed everything. The call lit up my screen like a flare in the blizzard. Graydon Hale. My grip tightened on the wheel, and for a split second, I wondered if I was hallucinating. There was no way this man, my grandfather's attorney, should have been calling me now. Not tonight, not in the middle of this mess. But the name stayed there, unmoving, glowing through the snow-blurred windshield. I answered, forcing my voice to steady. Graydon? Harlan, he said, his tone clipped, but calm. Are you somewhere private? I hesitated. Callista was sitting beside me, curled slightly forward, one hand on her belly. Cassian, thank God, was still asleep in the back seat, scarf pulled up to his nose. Yes, I lied softly. I'm alone. What's going on? Then listen closely, he said. I don't have much time, and what I'm about to say cannot wait. I turned down the heater fan so I could hear him better. The car's warmth thinned, but the tone in Graydon's voice kept my skin chilled regardless. Callista looked at me, eyebrows lifted slightly in silent question. I gave her a half smile, though I had no idea what I was about to hear. Graydon didn't waste time. Your grandfather amended his trust 3 weeks before he passed. I'm calling because, as of tonight, the amendment is active. I blinked. What amendment? He paused, measured. Harlan, your grandfather left his entire estate to you. All of it. You are now the sole inheritor. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. Graydon continued. That includes all liquid assets, properties, and equity shares. Total value is estimated at $9.5 billion, give or take market fluctuations. I pulled the car gently toward the shoulder, eased it to a crawl, then parked. My hands were suddenly shaking, not from the cold. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. I don't understand. Why now? The trust was structured to activate only if and when your family took a specific kind of action against you or your household, he said, voice low. Tonight meets that threshold. I stared at the snow whipping past the windshield, wipers struggling to keep up. The world outside was chaos, and now the world inside was too. I looked over at Callista. She was watching me closely, worry tightening her brow. I couldn't explain this, not yet. Not while she was already carrying too much. Graydon went on. Your grandfather wanted the transfer to be contingent. He wanted proof, not just that you were capable, but that they were incapable of protecting what he valued. I swallowed hard. He knew they'd do this? There was a pause, then, he suspected, and he prepared accordingly. My voice dropped. Why me? His answer came softer. There's a note in the file. I was instructed to read it to you when the trust activated. I waited, the hum of the car the only sound between us. Graydon read, Harlan carries the family's conscience. He should also carry its future. That line knocked the breath from my chest more than the numbers ever could. All those years I thought I was the afterthought. The spare tire. The one who kept quiet and did the right thing while Merrick basked in the spotlight. All that time, someone saw me. I blinked quickly, clearing the fog from my eyes. He wrote that? He did, and he meant it. I turned away, watching the blur of streetlights through the snow. Callista gently reached over, her fingers brushing my arm. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I nodded, though the word felt too simple. I wasn't okay. I was stunned. I was grieving and angry and disoriented. But I wasn't broken. I pulled the phone back. "What now?" I asked Graydon. "There's more," he said. "With the trust now active, you have control over all Rowe family assets. That includes the house, businesses, joint accounts, everything." My stomach twisted. "So they'll know." "Yes," he confirmed. "The official notices go out tomorrow. Once they see the legal documents, they'll understand who holds authority now." I leaned my head back against the seat. The irony was bitter. The same family that tossed us into the snow would now realize they handed control over to the son they didn't want at the table. But this wasn't triumph. Not even close. It was weight. Immense. Cold. Permanent. "I never wanted this," I said quietly. "I know," Graydon replied, "but I believe you'll use it wisely. Just be careful. Merrick won't take this well, and your parents may react worse." I looked at Callista again. She wasn't asking questions yet, just sitting with me in silence, the kind that says I'm with you no matter what this is. Cashin stirred softly in the back seat. I let out a slow breath. "Thank you, Graydon. You'll receive full documentation by morning. Keep your phone close." I ended the call and sat still. The car was quiet again, except for the hum of the engine and the ticking of the heater slowly warming us. Finally, I turned to Callista. "My grandfather left something for us. Something that changes things." She studied my face. "What kind of something?" I hesitated, then said, "A way forward." She didn't ask for numbers or details. She just nodded and said, "Then let's use it to get safe. One step at a time." That's who she was. Always seeing the next right move, not the mess around it. Her calm steadied me more than any dollar figure ever could. I looked back at Cashin, then gripped the wheel again. The road ahead was still a blur of white, dangerous and slow. But at least I wasn't just driving to escape anymore. This time, I was driving toward something. And it wasn't revenge. It was rebuilding, reclaiming. It was protecting the two people who had stood by me while the rest of them walked away. But while I was still trying to understand the weight of that inheritance, someone else found out before I could even catch my breath. The screen lit up again before I even had time to breathe. I was still trying to grasp what Graydon told me when another name appeared. One I wished I could ignore tonight. Merrick. Callista stiffened beside me the moment she saw it. Even in the dim glow of the dashboard, I could see her jaw set. Cashin shifted in his sleep, but stayed curled up in the back seat, his scarf pulled up to his chin. I answered, keeping my tone steady. "What do you want, Merrick?" He spoke with a calmness that never meant anything good. "Where are you, little brother?" That voice, too smooth, too casual, the kind of tone he used when he thought he had the upper hand. I didn't answer his question. "Why are you calling?" "Well," he said, dragging out the word, "a friend of mine at the courthouse sent something interesting my way. Thought you might want to explain it before it gets around." A cold prickle crept up the back of my neck. So he knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough to sense a shift he didn't like. "What are you talking about?" I asked, He gave a low chuckle. Come on, you've been hiding money for years. We both know that. I just didn't know how much until today. Callista whispered. He knows, under her breath, barely audible. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Stop playing games, Merrick. He ignored me completely. I've got documents that prove everything. Dad and Mom are going to see them. Maybe even the rest of the family. And Callista's parents, too. People deserve to know the truth. He loved doing this, throwing out lies with such certainty that the world couldn't help but believe him. You don't have anything, I said quietly, because deep down we both knew it. He snapped back, You're not the victim here. You've been caught. Don't pretend you're some saint. The words landed harder than they should have, because they were the same ones he used when we were teenagers, when he framed me for anything he didn't want traced back to him. Same tone, same arrogance, same expectation that I'd fold. Before I could respond, Callista leaned over and gently took the phone from my hand. Merrick, she said, voice steady and cold. Whatever you think you know, stay away from my husband and my children. The line went silent for half a breath, just long enough for us to know she'd rattled him. Then his voice sharpened. Callista, he's pulling you into his lies. Open your eyes. He's been manipulating you for years. She didn't let him finish. She ended the call with one clean tap and set the phone back in the cup holder. The quiet that followed felt heavier than the storm outside. Callista kept her hand on mine. He doesn't get to talk to you like that anymore. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the years of being talked over, dismissed, blamed for things I never did. It all pressed at my ribs, like something trying to break out. I finally found the words. I froze on that call. I shouldn't have. She shook her head. No, you've spent a lifetime being told you don't get to defend yourself. That kind of conditioning doesn't disappear in one night. Her voice softened. But you're not that kid anymore. I swallowed hard. She was right, but hearing it, having someone say it out loud, hit a part of me I'd ignored for too long. I wasn't silent because I lacked strength, I said slowly, almost surprised at my own realization. I was silent because I didn't think my strength mattered. Callista's grip tightened. It matters now. The storm howled outside the car as I pulled us back onto the road. The snow came down even harder, thick enough to blur the lights ahead. Cassian shifted, pressing his cheek against the window, still asleep. Every mile felt like it carried two kinds of weight, what we had been forced to leave behind, and what we were driving toward, without even knowing it. Callista rested her hand on my arm again. Listen to me, she said softly. You don't owe any of them anything anymore. You owe us, and yourself. That's it. She said it without anger, without bitterness, just truth. Something inside me settled, like snow finally hitting ground after being tossed around too long. For the first time, I felt myself look at the road not as a path away from my family's cruelty, but toward a life where I wasn't begging for a place at their table. We drove on, slow and steady, the storm shaping everything around us. And just when I thought the night had taken everything from us, the storm forced me to make a decision that would change the course of the next 24 hours. I pulled off the road at the edge of the city where the snow had swallowed every line on the pavement. The glow of the motel sign flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive or give up. I understood the feeling. The building itself leaned slightly, as if tired of standing. Paint peeled from the door frames, and the parking lot was a patchwork of slush and ice. The storm hadn't let up. It pressed against us like a weight, relentless. I parked under the crooked canopy near the office. Callista didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I knew what this place looked like to her, and to Cation, who was still asleep in the back, clutching his little scarf like a lifeline. Inside the office, the clerk gave me a key without asking questions. Maybe he'd seen enough nights like this to know better. He slid it across the counter, gave a half-hearted smile, and said, "Room 9. Heat works, mostly." "Thanks," I murmured, even though gratitude felt out of place in my throat. Back at the car, I lifted Cation gently, his cheek pressed against my shoulder, warm and trusting. Callista followed slowly, her hand at her side, her steps cautious on the ice. As we entered the room, a stale draft greeted us first. The heater rattled like an old man clearing his throat. The wallpaper had yellowed with time, and the light above the bed flickered when I turned it on. Cassian stirred awake just enough to ask, "Are we doing a sleepover adventure?" Callista smiled, soft and brief. "That's right, buddy. Just like camping." I looked away before she saw the heat behind my eyes. They didn't just kick me out. They kicked out everything I ever loved. While Callista settled Cassian on the bed and helped him out of his boots, I stepped into the tiny bathroom. The light buzzed overhead, casting a gray wash over the cracked mirror. I looked at my reflection and didn't recognize the man staring back. Not because I looked different, though I did, but because I finally saw the truth behind my own eyes. They didn't hesitate. They didn't ask. They didn't care. Every sacrifice, every time I stayed quiet to keep peace, to avoid becoming the dramatic one, all of it meant nothing the second I became inconvenient. They didn't pause. They didn't even flinch. I braced my hands on the edge of the sink and closed my eyes. My chest ached, not from the cold or exhaustion, but from the grief that had no shape, no outlet. A chime echoed from the other room, my phone buzzing with a notification. I stepped out, wiping my face with the sleeve of my jacket. Callista was already lying down, her eyes closed. Cassian had curled beside her, breathing steadily. I checked my phone. A group text. Family thread. Except I was never included in that one. Tonight someone had mistakenly added me. Maybe Merrick. Maybe it was intentional. I opened it, and there it was. Merrick had sent a screenshot of some doctored document. Proof that I'd been hiding funds, funneling money for years. False, of course, but convincing to people who wanted a reason to believe the worst. My mother's reply came first. "He always was the dramatic one. I'm glad we finally see who he really is." Then my father. Cut him off. For good. Before I could react, before I could even take a screenshot, I was removed from the thread. Just like that. As if I'd never belonged there in the first place. I stood frozen in the center of the room, the phone still in my hand, the walls pressing in around me. That's when Callista emerged from the bathroom. She must have seen the preview of the message before I picked it up. Her eyes met mine. She didn't say a word at first. Then she cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Silent tears that slipped down her cheeks. Not for herself, for me. "They don't know you at all," she whispered. And for a second, I couldn't breathe. I'd been cut before, bruised by words, by silence, by cold shoulders. But this, having someone finally see the wound, the one I'd carried for decades without a name, that was the deepest cut of all. I sat beside her on the edge of the bed, the mattress sagging slightly under our weight. Her hand found mine. We didn't speak for a while. The heater hummed. The storm beat against the window. Finally, I said, "I thought losing them would break me, but I think I've been broken for a long time. Tonight just confirmed what I've been pretending not to know. She squeezed my hand. I'm not going to try and fix this anymore, I added. I'm not going to defend myself to people who've decided who I am, without ever really knowing me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder Graydon had given me. The trust documents, pages that didn't just hold numbers. They held instructions, conditions, deadlines, a path, a way forward. I began reading, slowly, carefully. Beside me, Callista rested her head on my shoulder. You're done letting them define you, she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to, because I'd already decided. But I didn't know that while we tried to rest, Merrick was about to launch the one attack he believed would finish me for good. I hadn't been asleep long when my eyes opened to the pale, early light sneaking in through the cracks of the curtain. The storm had eased, though not fully, just quieted into a whisper after last night's howl. Snow still drifted sideways in thin, icy streams, clinging to the car windows out front. It was 6:10 a.m. Callista lay beside Cassian, one hand gently draped over his back, the other resting across her stomach. Both of them still, warm, tangled in the same blanket. That quiet, the kind that only comes after something has broken, held in the air like a breath no one wanted to release. I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside, letting the cold bite into me. My boots crunched softly on the fresh snow. The sky was slate gray, low and heavy, like it hadn't decided yet if the sun would come up. I stood near the car and watched my breath rise in small, visible bursts. I've learned over the years to recognize the space between storms, the stillness that doesn't last. This was that kind of silence. Something was coming. When I got back inside, the room smelled like sleep and motel heat. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. 3 missed calls. Work. I slid my finger across the screen and tapped voicemail. My managing partner's voice came through, crisp and emotionless, like someone reading a script they'd rehearsed too many times. Harlan, I'm calling regarding serious allegations we've been made aware of overnight. Ethical breaches, financial misconduct. Until a formal investigation concludes, your employment is suspended effective immediately. The message ended. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, my hand still holding the phone but not feeling it. That was Merrick. I didn't need proof. I knew how he worked. He'd taken some vague half-truth or twisted story, something just believable enough to pass, and planted it like poison in the right ears. I could hear his voice behind it. Harlan's been unstable for a while. He's been hiding things. You should probably look into it, just in case. It wasn't even clever. It didn't have to be, because suspicion is cheap, and it travels faster than facts. I had built my reputation at that job brick by brick, through long hours and steady hands, not because anyone gave it to me, but because I earned it. And with one whisper, Merrick shattered it. I didn't move. Another vibration. Email. I opened it, blinking through the sting in my eyes. Subject, formal notice. HR investigation pending. It was worse than I thought. Anonymous complaint, accusations of verbal abuse, claimed I'd posed a threat during a family altercation. Whoever wrote it knew exactly how to phrase it. Clean, legal sounding. No detail. Just enough implication. It had his fingerprints all over it. I didn't hear Callista stir until she spoke. What happened? I didn't answer right away. I just held the phone out to her. She read quietly, her eyes narrowing. When she looked up, her face had gone pale in a way I hadn't seen since the hospital years ago, when the doctor first used the word preterm during her pregnancy. He wants to take everything from you, she whispered. Not just my job, not just my name, everything. Because Merrick couldn't stand the idea that I still had something left. My family, my dignity, my future. This was him cornered. And like always, cornered men don't fight fair. I stood, paced once, then stopped at the mirror above the desk. I stared at my reflection. Tired eyes, face drawn. But something else beneath all that. Resolve. I'm not losing my family, I said softly. I'm escaping them. It was the first time I'd said it aloud. Every part of me had tried for years, tried to make it work, to earn my place, to be someone worth keeping. But the truth was, they had never seen me as more than a shadow to step around. Callista stood, her hand slipping into mine. You owe them nothing, she said. I turned toward her. In the quiet of that peeling motel room, something shifted. Not a thunderclap, not a revelation. Just a final, clean break inside me. I wouldn't explain myself anymore. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't defend. I walked back to the bed, grabbed the folder from my bag, and opened it on the table. Trust documentation, banking access, asset lists, legal directives, the next phase. I flipped through, reading carefully. He thought I wouldn't know what to do with this, that I'd be overwhelmed, scared, frozen. He'd underestimated the one thing I had that he never did: patience. Callista sat beside me. You're not reacting, she said. No, I replied. I'm planning. I pulled out my phone and found Graydon's number, my grandfather's attorney, the man who'd never flinched in a room full of sharks. I typed just 4 words. I need to activate everything. I pressed send. And just when Merrick thought he had buried me, something arrived at the motel that turned the entire story upside down. The SUV rolled in slow and deliberate, its tires crunching over frozen snow still clinging to the motel parking lot. It stopped directly in front of our door, engine idling, windows tinted, no license plate visible from this angle. I didn't move right away. Neither did Callista. She sat up straight beside me, her hand instinctively pulling Cassian closer, even though he was still asleep and hadn't stirred. I stepped forward cautiously, watching as the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, mid-50s, clean-cut, wearing a dark wool overcoat and polished shoes that didn't belong in a place like this. He scanned the door number, adjusted his gloves, and then met my eyes. Mr. Harlan Briggs? His voice was calm, practiced. I'm here on behalf of Winston Clark, your grandfather's estate attorney. For a moment, my brain didn't register anything except the fact that someone had just used my full name with precision. Then it all clicked. The message I'd sent just under an hour ago. The silence that followed. And now, this. I'd like to speak with you. Is now a good time? I stepped outside, letting the motel door close softly behind me. Go ahead. He opened the passenger side door and pulled out a flat leather briefcase. May I? He asked, gesturing to the small plastic table just outside our room. I nodded. We both sat. He opened the case and handed me a sealed folder. Inside were 3 items. The first was a formal activation notice, signed, dated, notarized. The inheritance was no longer theoretical. It was real, executable, effective immediately. The second, a letter, handwritten on thick paper, sealed in an envelope marked with my grandfather's initials. I hesitated before opening it. I glanced back toward the room. Callista stood at the window, watching silently, her face unreadable, but her presence grounding. I opened the letter. Harlan, if you're reading this, it means they've finally shown you who they are. I knew that day would come. I hoped it wouldn't, but I knew. Merrick's charm, Your parents' silence. It was all a system, one that only worked because you kept sacrificing yourself to keep the peace. I've watched quietly. I've seen your strength where others saw weakness, your restraint where others claimed cowardice. That ends now. This estate, this trust, it's not a reward. It's a tool. Use it to build the life you were denied. Use it to protect your family the way no one protected you. When they show you who they've always been, you must show them who you've always been too. No sign-off, no signature. Just that final line. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. There's one more document, the man said, handing it over. It grants you full financial control over all liquid and distributed assets, effective immediately. All security holds have been cleared. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, then leaned in, his tone shifting slightly. There's something else. He reached back into the briefcase and produced a printed email chain. Merrick Briggs contacted our office 3 days ago. He claimed you were mentally unstable and requested an emergency reassessment of the trust. I clenched my jaw. He said you were a danger to yourself and that the funds should be frozen. He included references to family turmoil, potential erratic behavior, all unfounded, of course. But because your activation request was already logged, protocol required us to run an internal audit. And, I asked, and we found something odd, small discrepancies, repeated transfers between joint accounts involving your parents and 2 of Merrick's registered entities. We're flagging it for further legal review. My hands tightened around the folder. That was Merrick. Strike first. Confuse the battlefield. Force everyone into defense. But this time, he hit the wrong wall. He miscalculated. I looked back at the representative. Can that report be compiled and filed by today? He didn't hesitate. It can be filed within the hour. I'll need your signature. I nodded and signed. I didn't smile. There was no triumph in this. No victory dance. Just quiet, clear resolve. I don't need their apology, I said, mostly to myself. I only needed the truth. I stood. Callista had come outside. She walked toward me and placed her hand over mine. No words between us. But her eyes said everything. She wasn't proud of what was happening. She was ready for it. The man packed up his case, nodded once, and left without ceremony. We watched the SUV disappear down the road until it became just another shadow in the morning mist. Back in the room, I pulled out my phone. I called the managing partner at the firm, straight to voicemail. This is Harlan Briggs. I expect a full investigation into the anonymous claims filed against me. I've retained legal counsel. I will cooperate fully. Thank you. No anger, no begging, just truth. Spoken plainly. Then I opened a group text, the same one they'd kicked me out of, then accidentally let me see. I typed one line. We need to talk today. I didn't mention the inheritance. I didn't mention the audit. I didn't need to. They'd feel the shift. The storm inside them wouldn't come from snow this time. And when they arrived at the house that afternoon, none of them were prepared for what I was about to reveal. The air outside had shifted. The storm was behind us now, leaving behind only piles of tired snow and a pale, unforgiving sky. We drove slowly through the familiar streets of the neighborhood I grew up in, each turn pulling at old memories, none of them warm enough to matter anymore. At exactly 2 p.m., I turned into the driveway of my parents' house. It had already been cleared, neatly shoveled. The porch light was on, even though daylight still clung to the sky. Callista reached across the console and touched my hand gently. I nodded and stepped out. Cassian was quiet in the back seat. Callista scooped him up and followed me toward the door. I didn't knock. I just walked in. The warmth inside hit like a strange contrast to everything I'd been through. The soft heat, the clean smell of furniture polish, the faint hum of the heating vents. It could have been a welcoming place if it hadn't become a battlefield. My mother sat on the edge of the living room couch, hands folded, face rigid. My father sat beside her, posture stiff, mouth a flat line. Behind them, Merrick stood like he'd rehearsed the pose, arms crossed, chin lifted, like the room was his stage. They looked at me like I was an intruder, like I was here to make amends. I didn't sit. Instead, I placed the estate folder on the coffee table, slow, deliberate, and said, "Let's get right to it." No one moved. I opened the folder and pulled out the audit summary first. "I'm not here to argue," I began. "I'm here to explain what's already happened." Their silence was permission enough to continue. The trust was activated, legally, fully, yesterday morning. My father's eyes twitched. Merrick contacted the estate attorney days ago, claimed I was mentally unfit. That triggered a required audit. During that audit, they discovered irregularities, money transferred between family-linked accounts and 2 LLCs under Merrick's name. Merrick didn't flinch. "You think you can spin this like I'm the villain?" "I don't have to spin anything," I replied calmly, sliding the document toward them. Merrick snatched it up, glanced through it, then tossed it back. "You manipulated the system." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I turned to my parents. For years, I tried to be the one who kept peace. I never fought you. I never accused. But last night, when you kicked us out with no explanation, no hesitation, it became clear you never really saw me. Mother opened her mouth. I didn't give her time. You believed everything Merrick told you about me, every lie. You didn't ask me once what happened. You didn't call. You didn't care that your grandson slept on a motel mattress while your other son fed you poison. Callista stepped forward. She took my hand and squeezed it. Cassian held her other hand, silent, watching, always watching. "I'm not shocked anymore," I said. "I'm just finished." "You're blowing this out of proportion," my father muttered. I looked at him. "Last night, you threw out your pregnant daughter-in-law and your grandson, over a rumor, over nothing verified. And today, you sit there expecting me to come crawling back." Merrick scoffed. "You weren't supposed to get anything. You were never the responsible one. You've always been." "That's enough," I said, cutting him off. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "That's the truth, isn't it? You thought I'd never measure up, that I'd never challenge your story." He looked at me with contempt until he realized I wasn't going to flinch. "I'm not going to the police," I said. "Not yet. The audit is already filed. Winston Clark's office will proceed with what they've found." I turned to my parents again. "I'm buying a house, far from here. You won't have access to us until we go through mediation. Not a call, not a visit. If you want to be part of our lives, you'll start with the truth, and you'll earn your way back." Mother's lip quivered. Father looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't. Merrick tried one last push. "You think money gives you power?" "No," I said. "Truth does." I stood fully, gathering the folder. "This is not a discussion. This is closure." And then I walked out. Callista followed, carrying Cassian close. The front door clicked behind us, and the cold touched my face like a breath of something clean. We walked down the driveway slowly. No yelling behind us. No one came after us. I opened the car door, lifted Cation into his seat, and buckled him in. Callista climbed in quietly. She didn't say much, just rested her hand on my knee. Her eyes met mine. We didn't smile. We didn't have to. I pulled the door shut and sat for a moment, looking at the house. I didn't win back a family, I whispered. I just stopped bleeding for one that never saw me. I started the engine, and as we pulled away from the house where I'd once tried so hard to belong, I felt something shift. Not loud, not obvious, but deep and final. My grandfather had once told me I'd know the day they showed me who they were. Today, I showed them who I am. There are storms that destroy you, and storms that reveal your strength. This one did both.